But if you're trying to get into the city this morning, just looking at parts that may be a bit difficult. Police roadblocks ahead of Saba Saba right now at Guru Nanak towards town. That's on the thickest superhighway roadblock. Roy Sambu footbridge. The Ngong Road at City Mortuary or the Nairobi Funeral Home. Awings Kodek, DOD roundabout, there are roadblocks there, so getting into the city is a no from there. Kangemi at the overpass, so if you're coming in from Kangemi on the A104 at Kangemi is where the roadblocks are. You will not be able to go further than that. And I know that vehicles are disembarking, folks, if you've come in from that area. And so you're either going to go on foot or you're going to go back to where you came from. We're also seeing, like I said just now during the traffic update, Kangemi overpass, Bunyala roundabout, there's a roadblock there. Madaraka at the roundabout, there's a roadblock there. Roysambu roundabout towards town, totally closed. So it's not just a roadblock, it is closed completely. You can't get through that. Kiambu Road closed at DCI headquarters. So from DCI moving forward, you can't get even anywhere near Muthaiga Square. Gitaru at the interchange is closed, not a roadblock, closed completely. And we're also seeing roadblocks then at Valley Road, just mentioned as well. So we're seeing some traffic at Valley Road. And this is folks who are then turned back, who are trying to get into the city via Valley Road. We're seeing the same thing at the Kasarani exit. Nyayo Stadium, also that roundabout. You're not going to be able to find your way into town to even get onto Uhuru Highway. So that's closed. Landis Road closed as well. Kenyatta Avenue and Uhuru Highway. So we're looking at Uhuru Highway, the length and breadth of it, coming in from Westlands or coming in off of Mombasa Road. So that's what we have so far. So if you're in any one of these areas trying to get onto Mombasa Road or trying to get into the city to get off, it's not going to be possible, at least for now. So we see that there's total road closure in some parts, but then we're also seeing that there are roadblocks in other parts. Roadblocks being that vehicles, you will disembark your vehicle and you will walk or you will turn back. Those are the choices that we have been given this morning.
Well, the train yesterday, so Kenya Railways released a statement 8 p.m. Sunday. This is 2 hours before departure. And in their public notice, they were talking about temporary suspension of Madaraka Express passenger service train. So we regret to notify members of the public that due to technical issues, the Madaraka Express 10 p.m. passenger train from Mombasa to Nairobi has been suspended. Kenya Railways prioritizes the safety of our passengers. We apologize for any inconvenience caused. We saw from the managing editor after this notice what happened at the Mombasa terminus. A lot of people who had actually driven there with luggage, with children, ready to come to Nairobi and other parts of the country were told you can't because there are technical issues with the train. However, there is a post that I've just seen. At that same time, a video shows that same train leaving Mombasa terminus at around that same time. So the 8 p.m. Madaraka Express arrived in Mombasa. Apparently, it had technical issues that had been suspended for 10 p.m. trip. Then later on, the train just left with no one on board.
So the same train that had technical difficulties and was not going to travel because of these technical difficulties then actually left with the same technical difficulties. But I guess the technical difficulties that it had were the passengers.
Yes.
And now having no passengers, then it was able to leave and go to Nairobi.
Yeah.
No?
Well, according to the video I'm watching right now that has been posted on the socials, that 10 p.m. train departed Mombasa terminus with no one on board. So it's not... Let's not say it's not clear.
Were they doing a trial run whether the railway was still functioning? But let's just be open with it, yeah? There was no technical difficulty because at any given point that statement ought to have been released way earlier. Because remember when Kenyans were trying to actually access the train station, some were blocked at Dongokundu bypass towards the train station. So if you just look at all these and what is happening, there is clearly a plan to just stop Kenyans. Because remember, there was Summertide's event that was in Diani, and majority of the young people who had traveled down were coming back to Nairobi, and that's perhaps could be the reason why they were blocked not to come back to the city.
You know, the timing is suspicious,
Exactly,
obviously. Whether it's legitimate or not, the timing is what is suspicious because this is 2 hours before departure time. That's when everybody's getting... that's when this post was actually sent.
Yeah.
Already people had arrived at Mombasa terminus. And then we're waking up this morning, all the major roads coming into the city, they're also clearly blocked. So you read that script and it tells you, and it's pointing to one thing, that it's trying to make sure that you stop any movement from outside Nairobi coming into Nairobi. Maybe only flights are the ones that are.
But then again, how do you also explain that the train that had technical difficulties left Mombasa
with no one on board?
I'm telling you, the technical difficulties were the people,
passengers.
Yeah, so that's what we're looking at.
When the rain starts beating, it beats hard.
Proper. Well, one man has made his way this morning despite those technical difficulties, and he joins us in a conversation this morning. And so all of this understood as we get into our conversation. Njeru Gathangu, good morning to you.
Good morning, ma'am.
How are you doing?
Sir. Very well.
Karibu sana.
Saba Saba ni sawa.
Ni sawa?
You made it.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
How?
All over the place. Go roundabouting everybody.
You roundabouted everybody and everything.
Yes, and I'm here.
Did you have to use the expressway then to get on?
No.
Okay.
No.
But it's like
first of all, they have closed all these roads around Nyayo Stadium, around Timor. So it's difficult. But nevertheless, some of them understand that everything cannot be stand still. Yeah.
Right. Njeru Gathangu is a former Runyenjes member of parliament and joins us here this morning. Very glad that you could make it into the Situation Room this morning.
Thank you.
We're going to look at the power of protests. It seems to have a lot of power because we're seeing that everything essentially is being shut down so that these protests don't take place. But we also see a time where protests were the order of the day, and that if anything, it moved people in a particular direction. That if the needle of governance or the needle of government were to move, that it was the protests in some case that did something. And it's not just Kenya, anywhere around the world. So that is what propels us into our conversation for this morning. We're glad that you're here. Duncan Okachu was supposed to join us as well. He may be stuck somewhere, so we'll see how this goes. But the discourse must continue.
Right.
We're going to welcome you to the show with a proverb. Dennis will tell you which country he's in, and would like to hear interpretation of the proverb that he gives.
Yes. So today we're in a country that is 62 years old, got its independence in 1963. It is a country that boasts of a proper economy that majorly depends on agriculture, but as well is doing everything because it is also considered to be an economic hub when it comes to matters technology, a silicon savannah, especially in the East Africa region. This country, its capital is Nairobi. Yeah. And the proverb today is simple. Siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya. How would you interpret that?
Oh, siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya. You see, some of the people that say that were also close to us, and we were saying about them that wana siasa mbaya. Na yeye mwenyewe ama hawa wenyewe walikuwa natuambia pia uenda tukawa na siasa mbaya. What it means, it is it's like a sword that Jesus Christ was talking about, that he came with a sword that is double-edged. Siasa mbaya to the government is that which intends to remove them. Siasa mbaya to the people is what oppresses them. Siasa mbaya maisha mbaya is a correct statement that for the people to be able to thrive economically in peace and united, they must have a leadership that understands their aspirations and therefore get out there articulate policies that would be able to achieve that.
A different way of looking at siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya. Both sides have their own politics.
Yes.
Depends which side you're in.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is interesting because we come into a time where, if we really look at it, we're now in 2025, the beginning of the new administration was marked by protests. It was marked by Maandamano. We are hearing already, we heard at a very early time, the Sufuria movement. That's what it was called.
Sufuria.
Yeah. The opposition at the time, and I say at the time deliberately because that same opposition now is part of the broad-based government, but the opposition at the time was crying about, the high cost of living and the need for certain governance to take into place. So protests happened then. We then went into a time where protests happened in 2024, and there was the anti-finance bill, which essentially was a bill that was seen by many, a draconian one, to take what was left out of the pockets of Kenyans. And that resulted in a time whereby it seemed as though the language that was going to be heard by government was that of protest. Saba Saba, many say, was watered down some over the years. But now we come into a time where another protest, and we see the country essentially shut down because of this. And so we're asking the very simple question at the beginning of this conversation. Do protests have power? And if so, what power do they wield?
Now, of course, every protest is a projection of what people feel, what grievances they want to express. And you know, one of the things that I have observed in this country is that the government, all governments from Jomo to where we are today, appear like everything they do is to hurt the citizen, you know, everything that they do. And the reason is that all of them were not actually qualified to be our leaders. You know, some of them were quite fake. Others were brought in by the Mzungus, you know, while others were built by the same characters to be able to continue and propagate the same things, the ideals that they stood for. And so Kenya is almost permanently grieving about something, you know, and that something, one, revolves around economics, you know, agriculture, education, such. And so does the procession or demonstration have power? Yes. Every time there is a procession, a demonstration, or if you like, some conflict between the people and the government kind of tones down because they fear injection from office, you know, and that is the only thing they fear, injection from office. So that what you are saying this morning about closing this nation, that nothing happens, is simply because of fear. That the government fears that it could be ejected, and it can happen anytime. Why? You have hurt the people. You have touched their emotions negatively. And so, humanly, they will have to react someday unless you tone down. And they are not sure which day and which minute that will come. Because they have hurt the people and they know what they are doing against the people is quite wrong.
How has the character of these protests changed over time? Because you were involved in many. You were involved in what many call the second liberation, and fought vehemently to say, you know what, there is a space, a democratic space, which the country has not yet entered, and fought for that. Quite some. Do we see that the character of that fight has changed?
It has changed because I think some of our leaders are very crude people, almost primitive. You know, I'm sorry to use such words. Primitive because, look, when people have announced they are going to have a procession, peaceful, and you introduce goons and violent askaris, you know, what it simply means, it's going to annoy the demonstrators. One, during our time, we announced demonstration. Police would be there, but they will not bring the goons. The goons were introduced in this country by what they called something, 1997, 98, where my brother Gumo would collect some pharaohs in the city, introduce them in the streets while we were demonstrating, and they started beating people. That is how they worked on Timothy Njoya, you know. And when you beat the people as police or goons on the streets, everybody gets worked up and they start throwing stones. They can get anything. They burn cars, you know. But if the government wants these things not to happen, they must approach these things civilly, you know. Otherwise, then what they are introducing in this country is anarchy, you know. Things they cannot be able to control, things they will not be able to handle, and they know it. Because we are not the first one, you know. Last year, what happened was something very unique. that we have got about 17 countries whose parliaments have been abused by the public. And the reason is that members of parliament start playing the oppressor, supporting the despots. And therefore, in the end, the people decide that the members of parliament are actually the enemies. And so they force their way to parliament.
Njeru, as we look at the country today, you compare back in the day when you're in the struggle, today as the young people are in the struggle, you look at a government that is doing everything to block demonstrations to happen across the country. There's a bill in parliament right now that wants to control how demonstrations will work. And if you look at what is happening today in the morning, seems as though we have a government that is afraid of its people, which asks the question, is it true that the police are unable to handle protest in the country, or is it engineered to look as if police cannot handle?
Our police force is a very frustrated force. Extremely frustrated. I remember when I was in parliament, I brought a small little question to the minister then, Masden Mandoka, about the policemen. And I had collected about 1,000 payslips from the police force. 1,000 payslips. Most of them were earning less than 26,000 shillings. Less than 26,000. And particularly the CIDs were expected to wear civilian clothes, presentable suits as they go around their work. Right? And when I questioned them, I found that they were having take home of about 2,200 shillings maximum. And one of them said, and I told the police that, I told the parliament that, and Mazen Madoka, that Bwana Gathangu, there is nothing else I can do. I have to pick my arm now and look for some little money for my children. And so, meaning I will be involved in some robbery or some theft somewhere, right? And so, when you are looking at the policeman, it's a character that is frustrated, deep frustrated. Those days they would be sharing quarters that about 2 or 3 families would be sharing the same tent, those iron makeshifts. And when the man comes out to the public and he is challenged, he remembers the treatment the same society or government is giving him, and he reacts badly. And therefore, one of the things that is happening in this country is this. There is either a go slow with the police, or if not, they actually think they are part of the people, because they are. And the government should be careful that in the end, they are actually silently mobilizing the forces to be with the people. And they have to check this. I'm a former military man also, and I know that there comes a point where the military man, the askari, sees the nonsense bestowed on the people, and they decide that it's going.
But Njeru, that conversation, we've had that conversation through all the cycles of reforms when we talk about the police, and
yes.
it almost comes across as an excuse for what they do, that look, they're being paid poorly, and so therefore that excuses corruption. But then what we are looking at on the streets currently is viciousness. Because many Kenyans are frustrated. There are many Kenyans who can't even make 100 shillings a day. They're equally frustrated. So it can't just exclude the police. But how then do you describe the kind of viciousness that we are seeing? Because during your time, we had deaths as well. We had people being beaten by batons.
Yes.
Today, it's a police officer in clear view of a camera lens shooting at point blank at somebody. Does that excuse, whether they're frustrated, whatever it is, does that still excuse the level of viciousness? Because it doesn't change?
That one does not. In these forces, you'll find that we have got special squads which are formed to address some specific areas. And those squads are formed by friends of the leaders. So that if you're looking at the Kenya Police, you have got departments which are directly involved somehow to the leaders. Either the minister in charge of the security, or you are talking about the commanders of various bases, etc., or even the president himself. That they decide that we are going to form squads, and those squads are to silence the people. Whoever is seen emerging, either as potential or as leader of a certain resistance, pluck him out.
Is that what you're currently seeing happening on the street?
That is what is happening now. You know, that is what's happening now. And although I don't want to challenge any particular person, but I can tell you that as far as I'm concerned, the senior commanders of the Kenya police forces know who is plucking people to murder. In fact, let me tell you, it has gone to a certain extent where they visit people's homes, get or arrest characters from those homes, and then go and kill them. That you have seen. And they continue telling us, the police continue saying, we did not arrest that character. He is not in our cell. No. Nyayo House was not in the cells of the police, but I was there for many years. Or many months. You know, we have got a place next to the Kenya Planters Cooperative Union, you know, down there, you know, which they used as torture chambers. It was not a police station. We have got Karura Forest. It was not a police station. Yet, the managers and operators of those areas were recruited from the police forces. And that was by some characters who knew what exactly they wanted. Nyayo House was put up, you know, to torture people, specifically as a torture chamber, to torture people who appeared to be against the system, right? And so when a policeman comes and says, "Sisi hatujui ni nani," no, that's nonsense.
But Njeru, I mean, let's give some historical context to this.
Yeah.
You are arrested, tortured, detained without trial.
Yes.
You've gone through it all. 35 years ago is when we had the original demands of Saba Saba protest on July 7th, 1990.
Yes.
35 years later, have we even made progress?
It's still happening, and you know, a lot of us are as good as our parents and teachers. By the way, you know. So,
what do you mean by that?
Yeah, that is what I mean. That
No. What do you mean?
Listen, you know, and there is nothing wrong to say this.
Yeah.
You know, while we were doing all these things, the system was organizing about how they were going to confront us, stop us, right? And so they recruited some characters and organized to form a thing they called the YK 92. Yeah. Now YK 92 was led by our president and a few others, and we know them, and he knows I know. Because, you know, where he operated is where I was operating. You know, they spend a lot of money. In fact, the system printed a note, 500 shillings note, was printed specifically to be used by Youth for Kanu 92. Jirongo and my friend Ruto, you know. And they are there. They are about 7 of them that are here now, right? Now, what is it that those people learned from the system? Exactly that let's go out there, let us dish out this money, recruit our people, confuse them so that Kina Gathangu, Anyona and what have you do not get leeway to mobilize others.
But you look at that movement back then. Let's compare to what we are currently seeing in the country. So 1992 multi-party elections. So Youth for Kanu 92, like you're saying, YK 92. So this was during the reintroduction of multi-party politics. Now, Youth for Kanu 92 ostensibly was to mobilize grassroots support for President Moi.
Kanu.
And at the time, the target was purely to secure votes. Now, we are 2 years to an election. We are seeing the same patterns playing out today. How do you read this current pattern?
Maybe I reflected in very different ways myself. The very first thing is that what we see is a Jomo Kenyatta politic. Because and people talk about dynasties. We don't have dynasties in Kenya. It's a Jomo Kenyatta dynasty that is running, because from 1958, when he was brought from Rocky Tang to Macharia, the thing was to coach him, to guide him about how he was going to run this government. And when he came out here, the first thing he did was to adopt the provincial administrators. And the next one was to actually say that the white man's interest in Kenya will be protected. And from there, he started recruiting people who would continue with that program. What I see is handing over from time to time, government to government, about who was going to protect that same position. Now, what we are talking about is this. The emergence of people like Ruto, and I am here saying strongly because I know him, is that he is a Moi boy. And the Moi boy cannot be able to do anything else than now what he was bequeathed. Now, look, if you look at the characters of those governments we have had, you will actually see there is nothing else that happens other than protecting the position that Jomo Kenyatta took in 1961. And therefore, don't worry about that 5 or 65 years. From the time that Jomo Kenyatta was released in August 1961 to where we are now is 65 years. Nothing has changed.
And we've been asking ourselves questions around whether the civil space is shrinking, and what we see in terms of this movement, in terms of this friction that we've heard. And we're looking at the different character between when protests happened in the 90s and the 2000s and then into the 2020s. Are we seeing that there are threats to freedom of assembly, different from when they were before?
Yes, I think there is also a few things that Kenyans should reflect on. By the time that we were coming up, but between 1986 and 1992, the environment was very sober, that there was no usage of money, but from 1992, there was very heavy spending of money, and the people kind of have gotten involved and used to that money. And I wanted to remind people that we have got 7 items, which have affected the Kenyan social life. Interacting has become commercial, and therefore thinking together without money appears to me to be hindered. The first one is that the British were preparing to hand over reins of power to an African, thought about curriculum, school curriculum. And the school curriculums that have been developed in this country have affected our education, has made education be quite flimsy, in the sense that people have been denied of their history, characters have been denied of formation, and in the end, anything that appears to be sensible, central to life, has been kept aside. That is number one. Number two is that we have brought to the fore characters that are yes men. And the yes man in Africa appears to be very popular because that yes man agrees with the former colonialists, and therefore we are permanently neo-colonialism, meaning that our leaders advance that which was being done by the colonial master. And number three is that we introduced in this country a subject called family planning. And that subject has brought a lot of heavy arguments and debates. And that particular area has made our people think that to be free, to be financially able, you have to remain single, small family, and most of it immoral. I think we need to relook in that so that we know what the individual and the family is. Number 4 is that we were introduced in 1990s to the NGO and the evangelical world, both from the United States. Meaning that if you want to go to church, in fact, and you don't have transport, it is paid for. You know, those days you want to go to church and you don't think there is going to be lunch, it is given, it is served. While everybody who goes to a meeting, whether it is education meeting where the individual is going to benefit or not, he is paid for the transport, he is given what they call the sitting or whatever allowance, and in the end, something little to go and give to the family. Without that money these days, nobody wants to attend any meeting or any sitting. You have to promise that there is that money. If there isn't, then you can keep your meeting. And then the next thing that is preached in our churches is prosperity. Now, you can actually see it that if the NGO is giving money for attendance of meetings and the church is preaching prosperity and the government leaders or politicians are actually offering that money, it becomes the way of life. Meaning that therefore anything that you do in this country without money will not be respected, and you become a poor person if you don't have that money. The question is, where do you get it from? Then lastly, and that is the best thing you can see happening now, that all the organizations that are giving the money, mobilizing the people, have to adopt and preach LGBTQ plus, you know, which means we are deflocking our young people completely of morals. And so that money plus immorality makes even the civil society totally diluted. And that actually is the question that you're asking. Are we losing it? And it is the money that is making us lose it.
So if the money was not there, but it's so for all that we see, what we're talking about now, the protests that we see, that there's a demand for good governance. Are you saying that even those who are demanding, as well as those who are being demanded of, we are in this money-soaked, atmosphere, and that's why we're doing the things that we do? Those who protest are doing it for money. Those who are not doing the governance right are behaving this way for what money they can get.
Some are, Mom. Some are. Some are. And those that are getting paid are mobilizing others to themselves. You know, that we have heard people in this country whose business is actually looking for that money and for them to be agents of other leaders to go and bring more. Those people that are carrying the whips and the rungus on the streets are actually paid. And you can see where they are paid.
For what? And this is the thing. For what gain? When we see, and this is one of the first things that you said, that there are goons who are being, let out onto the streets. There are those who are paying them. To what end? What is the purpose of having goons? You may disrupt people for an hour, but why do it?
Simply this, because we also said it earlier, that those that are in leadership now fear that they have done quite a lot of evil against the people and they feel threatened. Who is it that can save us? Now, if we bring the police and the military, people will say that we are becoming dictators and so forth and so forth. So the best one is, let us employ some of their own groups to go and combat them. That's the interest.
But then, does that then negate the point you made earlier? Because you're looking at the organic Gen Z protests.
Yes.
And a lot of these young people are not going to the streets because they want money. They actually want to secure their future because they are seeing, from the finance bill protest that we saw last year to what we currently see today, minus the infiltration of the goons who are paid. So you have a population and a generation that is saying, look, we want accountability, we want justice. Where is our money going into? We want to have clear priorities in this country. We want better governance. We want good leadership. So the agitation then is not necessarily influenced by they want money. There is a group, and because it's the politicians' playbook to use goons, meaning that they will pay them money to go cause this disruption. Does that then mean that we are coming off, there's a generation coming off the handouts and the politics of tokenism?
True. You see, the generation that we have now, we are calling the GNC. In fact, I was talking to some of them yesterday, and I was reminding them that their fathers were denied a lot of knowledge for 30 years when we had President Moi's leadership. 30 years. They got involved in drama festivals that children are simply thinking about singing and drama in school. Hakuna kitu ingine. Then they meet once a year, in big festivals, and that is what they aimed for. For 30 years, there is nothing else they knew other than that. They did not bring up their children, in the way that you and I would think that the family should do. And so they were denied. Now, those that were denied are being blamed by their own children that they did not bring them up well. And so these children are saying, you failed us. We want to resuscitate our national life. Now, that's number one. Number two, we have got people that have infiltrated these young people, right? And those people that have infiltrated them are using money to confuse and to recruit from them. And you have seen a few people, some of them that we thought would be their leaders, are not there anymore. And number two is that when we think that they are going to be involved, then they start quarreling themselves. No, that one is not ours. Hiyo ni akina fulani. Wacha tu, so they have lost the aim unless they reinstate it.
But this question of money didn't just start with the Gen Z. During your time, like you rightly said, from YK92, the Girong with the 500 shilling, money was still being used.
That is when it started.
That's when it started.
1992.
So money was used then.
Yes, and they brought a lot of confusion. In fact, let me say this, sir, that if you follow the people that were in the youth for Kanu 92, who are in charge of the districts, they are no more. They died. Some of them through accidents, others committing suicide. That is what we were told. Others actually murdered. The question is this: what did that money do? What is it that it left us? It left us a lot of pain, and that pain has not been addressed, and we are accumulating it. Every time that we are doing things, something is happening that we will never address. We witnessed young people dying last year. Anybody talking about them? Now, today, we are talking about so many died at the world market and so forth. Is anybody addressing it? No. In fact, the leaders in this country need to appreciate one thing. It takes a minute to tip off society. And you can be able, because you have time now, to address it. In fact, it is not the people that should be able to create these programs. It is the government and the leader. The president waking up tomorrow morning and saying, look, we have cultural organizations and associations in this country, in every region. These cultural associations, nataka kusikia kutoka kwa wazee, wanataka tufanye nini? It will take only 7 days, and these things will be addressed.
But if you say the same wazes, this current generation is accusing of not taking care of the things they needed to take care of, if the president reaches out to these wazes, is there going to...
No. You got it wrong. There is my parent, for example.
Yes.
If I am 20 years, my parent maybe is about 45, right? Those are not the mzes I'm talking about. I am talking about the elders. People, if you go to care of the Luo, he will be able to give you the mzees who are sober and characters who look at society as just about
But Njeru, in context and in all fairness, all these wazers, what good have they done? Because we know most of them are actually bought. We know most of them are under some payrolls. What good are they?
I don't think that is correct. I don't think it is correct. You see, people who do must have an opportunity to do.
Okay.
You know, they have to be given opportunity to do it. You cannot dismiss people until you have given them duties and responsibilities
on how to go forward.
And this is what I'm saying, that the elders in this country cannot continue to be called elders until they have been given opportunity to address the issues that are disturbing this nation.
So Saba Saba is the day Gathangu, when obviously it is commemorated that there was a fight for electoral reform, huge fight, and said no, what we see or what we've been seeing, what has been the modus operandi for the longest time, whereby anybody can decide whatever happened at an election during the Mlolongo system, you know, that you could then insist and say there must be reforms, we must do this the right way, and then there was a fight for that. Saba Saba was on this 7th of July is when Kenyans came out into the streets and demanded this. There were certain politicians who were at the front line, one of them being very clearly one Mr. Matiba. And then we saw that in the years that came after that, there were many a politician who fought that fight, you yourself being one of them. And many can remember that history. But then it brings us to a time where today, on this day, Saba Saba, when electoral reforms were being fought for at that time, that there are certain reforms that are being fought for and demanded for at this time, today. So the character, the DNA of the protest hasn't changed. Is it possible that 60 years ago, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, the demands that were being made then are more or less the same demands that are being made today with Saba Saba?
The origins of Saba Saba, because some people may not know, is in Tanzania, 1954, when Julius Nyerere was still mobilizing to have Tanzania free. And 1954 is when they started. And the day, Saba Saba 1957, is the year or the day that they launched it and talked about what it is they wanted to see in the economics and their freedoms. When we were thinking about Kenya in 1986, 87, 88, we were thinking about how we could stop the government from victimizing some people because of Mwakenya movement. And the Mwakenya became such a big victim that a lot of people were arrested from the universities, students and their lecturers, some of them detained, others forced into exile, etc. And we were saying, no, this one cannot continue this way. So at the tail end of the Mwakenya arrests is when we said, let us have boldly statements about reintroduction of multipartyism, which had been killed completely in 1982. And what happened in 1982 was this, that Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, John Janyona, and some of us had thought of starting a party called the Kenya African Socialist Alliance. And it was going to be announced when John Janyona was arrested en route to the Intercontinental Hotel where we were going to announce it. And they went to Jaramogi's house around Jerusalem, Uhuru, and restricted him there. So it was not announced. And therefore we knew that George has been taken. A few minutes later, somebody said, hey, please don't try. And so George was arrested and detained, and the people
So Saba Saba is the day, Gathangu, when obviously it is commemorated that there was a fight for electoral reform. Huge fight, and said, no, what we see or what we've been seeing, what has been the modus operandi for the longest time, whereby anybody can decide whatever happened at an election during the Mlolongo system, that you could then insist and say there must be reforms. We must do this the right way. And then there was a fight for that. Saba Saba was on this 7th of July is when Kenyans came out into the streets and demanded this. There were certain politicians who were at the front line, one of them being very clearly one Mr. Matiba. And then we saw that in the years that came after that, there were many a politician who fought that fight, you yourself being one of them. And many can remember that history. But then it brings us to a time where today, on this day, Saba Saba, when electoral reforms were being fought for at that time, that there are certain reforms that are being fought for and demanded for at this time, today. So the character, the DNA of the protest hasn't changed. Is it possible that 60 years ago, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, the demands that were being made then are more or less the same demands that are being made today with Saba Saba?
The origins of Saba Saba, because some people may not know, is in Tanzania, 1954, when Julius Nyerere was still mobilizing to have Tanzania free. And 1954 is when they started. And the day, Saba Saba 1957, is the year or the day that they launched it and talked about what it is they wanted to see in the economics and their freedoms. When we were thinking about Kenya in 1986, 87, 88, we were thinking about how we could stop the government from victimizing some people because of Mwakenya movement. And the Mwakenya became such a big victim that a lot of people were arrested from the universities, students and their lecturers, some of them detained, others forced into exile, etc. And we were saying, no, this one cannot continue this way. So at the tail end of the Mwakenya arrests is when we said, let us have boldly statements about reintroduction of multipartyism, which had been killed completely in 1982. And what happened in 1982 was this, that Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, John Janyona, and some of us had thought of starting a party called the Kenya African Socialist Alliance. And it was going to be announced when John Janyona was arrested en route to the Intercontinental Hotel where we were going to announce it. And they went to Jaramogi's house around Jerusalem, Uhuru, and restricted him there. So it was not announced. And therefore we knew that George has been taken. A few minutes later, somebody said, hey, please don't try. And so George was arrested and detained, and the people decided that what they were going to do was, the government was to restrict Odinga, because Odinga was an old man. He had been involved in very many activities. So they thought of restricting. They got him from Nairobi to Mbodo, where they restricted him in his compound.
We're talking about Jaramogi Odinga.
Jaramogi,
yes.
Not Raira.
Yes.
Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. So now, what I'm saying is this, that after Kenya African Socialist Alliance was denied, the next thing we did was now in 1987, 88, where we said we should have another political outfit that was going to be the People's Mobilizer. And therefore, 1988, when Moi dissolved Parliament, in March, we thought the best way to start was to propose John Janyona to be the Speaker of the National Assembly, so that when these people who have been elected in May are convening in Parliament, John Janyona's name be there. They fought it. Okay, when they fought that, then we started again having an idea that John should be the Secretary General of Transport and Allied Workers Union. All this was to try and see whether we could get some entry point. That was denied. And when it was denied, then we thought the best thing, because again, the president has announced that Kanu was going to have elections in 1988, October. Then we would go for those elections. About 30 of us decided to try to get into Kanu so that tuchokole tukiwa pale ndani. And so I think 21 of us were elected. I was elected in Embu myself. George Anyona was rejected, not rejected, but the Kanu knew. They stopped him, but I was elected. And so we started in October 1988. And by the 1st of January 1989, we had done so much until I was almost kicked out of Kanu. And before they kicked me out, we announced the multi-party now movement in Kenya. And when we announced the multi-party movement in Kenya, what did we do? In 1988, after the dissolution of Parliament and the elections of Kanu, many characters in Kanu were thrown out, including the Matiba that she is talking about. Simeon Nyachai was the chief secretary. He was kicked out of that. And many, Akina Omanga, Akina Nani, many people were displaced. So we went out looking for them. Simeon Nyachai agreed, but he agreed with some condition. Let me not be at the forefront. If you want somebody at the forefront, I'll give you. So he is the one that introduced Matiba to the movement. So we went and met Matiba, and Matiba agreed. Who else was with us? Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who was our first person to consult, and said, yes, we shall support you. But at this time, because you people are going to be arrested, we would like to save some of us to come and fight for your release. Because you'll be arrested by Moi, But now, go to Bildad Kagia. Tell him that you have told me this. After Bildad Kagia, go to Echengoneko, tell him that. Go to Lukobok and tell him that. And after that, continue with your program. And we continued that way, and true to that statement, we were all arrested. Jaramogi Oginga, not Jaramogi, but Matiba, Rubia, and Raira were taken on the 4th of July. We were taken on the 11th of July, on the eve that Nelson Mandela was visiting Kenya. In fact, why were we taken? It's because the Saba Saba, which had been announced on the 23rd, I think, of April or May, brought in so many people. We were able to bring characters people from Kisumu, from Mombasa, and I think that is why maybe they are actually restraining Mombasa from coming to Nairobi, because they did that time, excitedly. Kisumu was beautiful. They came, in about 9 buses. And Saba Saba, by the time that it was starting by around 12, we had more than 500,000 people who had been brought from up country.
So there was a spirit in the people. There was a spirit which was, and it was countrywide, and it didn't. Countrywide. It was not dependent on where Kenyans were from regionally.
No,
it was one spirit for which Kenya was fighting.
Correct.
One of the characters that you mentioned is Raila Odinga, and that nothing at that time, according to what you're saying, would have stopped him, save for arrest.
Never.
Would have stopped him from coming out into the street.
Yes.
It's interesting because he's of a different notion today. Yes, they blocked people from coming in from Mombasa because there was a lot of the uprising and the patriotism that was shown coming in from Mombasa. Interestingly enough, the areas in which one of the first towns was established in Kenya. And then Kisumu, like you said, was beautiful. People came out. And Nairobi was, beehive of activity. Indeed, Kamukunji, one of the first places where this protest or this remembrance was registered. Raila Odinga comes out and says, you know what, let's not go to the city. Let's go to Kamukunji to remember it. Is there some kind of weight in what he says?
Well, first of all, you know, Raira is right to go to Kamukunji. Kamukunji is a very sacred ground for politicians and for political activism in this country. It will be remembered that even as early as in the 50s, Kamukunji was still a very central ground for politicians. However, I am not sure whether Raira is going to Kamukunji to celebrate Saba Saba, but because one, he was not part of the group that actually announced the Saba Saba. No, he came in after. And number two is that they were arrested on the 4th in the day, you know, and so they went. What happened in the Saba Saba, they actually didn't know, because already they had been detained. But the day marked by politicians like Raila Odinga becomes substantial in this country. Substantial in the sense that in the recent days, for example, and I want to remind my brother because, he is, we have been in detentions together and it is good to reflect on some things. In the recent days, a lot of people have been talking about Raira being, diluting himself by joining the government, which means that the opposition loses its stamina because of these things. Today, when I reflect about what he is saying, that he is going to Kamukunji, it simply means that he also has started realizing maybe there is something slightly wrong about what he is doing. And personally, I think it is good to say that, yes, my brother Raira, my comrade, yes, go to Kamukunji. And when you go to Kamukunji, remember how many souls have been lost on that ground, and how many we lost on the Saba Saba day 1990, and remember them. If it is possible, because you are close to one William Ruto, why is it that you would not be able to talk to this man, not just about political program for 2027, but about addressing the many cries, pains, hearts about those people that we have lost in these programs?
Isn't it ironic then, because Raila, who is in this broad-based arrangement, as they call it, has contacts and direct contacts to speak to the president, but coming out to say he's going to go to Kamukunji and then telling Kenyans not to go to the CBD but to go to Kamukunji, what's the significance? Why now? What's the significance now? Because is he saving face? What is he commemorating? What do you read into it?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I said this or I didn't when I said there is what in the Catholic Church masses they say mea culpa, mea culpa. Mea max, mea culpa. Meaning that it is my fault. It is my fault. It is my fault as Raila to have a Gen Z movement that thinks it is leaderless, that thinks it is partyless, that thinks it is regionless, that thinks it is everything less. Meaning that they actually said themselves, Raila, stay home. Let us do this for you, right? But we are going there as leaderless. Were they saying that they are leaderless because Raila was the leader? That is why I'm saying, look, he may have discovered, in fact, that the reason why we were meeting at the CBD as Gen Zs is because we were leaderless. Now that, Raira, you have come, maybe take your position and lead the movement from Kamukunji. That way then we shall be able to say the leader is back. Go out there to our friend William Ruto, talk to him about why our children must never be touched again.
Do you think that he still has a place commanding this opposition and commanding this position whereby he did stand, or maybe still does, in whatever capacity, to push for this particular agenda? It was very clear over the years, the arrests, the forced silences that Raila Odinga did go through, essentially to fight for a place where people would then be able to be free in a democratic space. It seems as though that has been relinquished today in the minds of many. Do you think he still holds that position in whatever capacity?
Yes, I think so, because repentance is a great sign for everybody. And his actions, saying at this particular moment in time that he is going to Kamukunji, is an expression of repentance. In fact, I was talking to some bishops last week, and I was telling them that they need to repent and apologize to the public of this nation that they went wrong in 2022. They should not have taken sides. And they felt shy. And one of them said, Gathangu, some of us cannot go because we support this man 100%, and we are not sure at what point we can enter this fray anymore. Then I said, maybe the best thing you can do is please say sorry to the country and ask the president to apologize to you. That is what I am saying. Any action that Raira is going to be taking that appears to be on the people's side is going to me to be a repenting action, and I am able to say that yes, Raira has got a way that he can be able to salvage the situation.
Joining us in the room as well this morning is Professor Noah Midamba. He's a foreign policy and defense expert.
Sorry. I thought I'd stop.
Ole sana.
Get you some water.
We'll get you sorted out with that, so that will be cleared up. But thank you, despite it all, for being here with us this morning. It took you a while, obviously, because you have to find your way around the city this morning, isn't it?
I got escorted by police.
Oh, they escorted you?
Yes.
Okay, that's fantastic.
Very good.
Yes.
All right. We're at Saba Saba, decades after the original one. And it seems that this Saba Saba this year is now a consolidation of the many protests that have been happening in the country over the last 2 years and almost 3 years, but brings us to a point where it falls on this 7-7. And we're asking the question about democracy in question. Is it a disillusionment, or what we've heard that people should just tuck it in and go and sit at home and let governance continue? Is that where we are?
Thank you for asking this profound question. I think we need to be very careful as a country when we talk about democracy. What is it? Lincoln described democracy as government of the people, by the people, and for the people. America itself has been, for the last 200 years, one of the best examples where people like me can go in and rise up the ladder to the highest and be able to do anything, buy a home, build a home, and then be able to return to my original country. So democracy offers everything to everybody. But I want to say this. Ronald Reagan was probably one of the most conservative presidents in the U.S. And in his last speech, if you see it, is probably one of the most powerful speech there is, where he say, America is everyone, from everywhere. And the moment America become something else, then the society will fall apart. And there is a test right now of what we call fundamental democracy in America. Is America going to see what was there yesterday, or are we going to see completely a different America? And America, based on my study and experience, is the most powerful country in the world, militarily and economically. So it will affect every single person on this earth. And then the young people, of course, are very fast and they learn very fast. And they're beginning to ask questions, what's going on? In our experiment, 60 years of independence, There are things we've done wrong. There are wrong courses we have taken. But by and large, if you look at Africa as a whole, and most of the third world, Kenya's done very well. Kenya is the fifth largest economy in Africa. If you compare Kenya and North Korea, GDP, Kenya economy is twice that of North Korea. And North Korea is shooting ICBM, but we are relatively feeding our people. So the issue is what messaging are we giving to the young people? I'm an educator. I was Vice Chancellor of KCA. I'm now Chair of Moi University. And we are on the verge of really retooling and redirecting Moi University so that Moi can be a center of training people about mindset. Mindset is that this is my country. I'm going to take care of it. It doesn't matter if I'm young or not, but I have obligation. So long as we are in a situation where they and us, we cannot move any further. And that is the kind of thing, my friend here is a parliamentarian. And they're very divisive. When they talk, when you listen to them, it's me and everything else. and so me and everything else is not going to work. Lee Kuan Yew said that he came in bare hand as Prime Minister of Singapore. He has two choices. One, to become the richest man in the world, grab everything and become the richest, or move the country up the ladder, and so everybody benefit. And so when you look at the Southeast Asia, which were colonized like ourselves, and they move into a very comfort zone and on top of the world, then you ask a question, why is Africa not able to do it? Here's my point. Mauritius is doing very well in terms of understanding young people, giving them room to express themselves, and providing democracy. It is the leading as far as Africa is concerned. And then Rwanda next door is also very aggressive in opening up space for young people and for democracy in Africa. And same with Tunisia. And South Africa, with all its problems, is relatively a democratic country. And so all in all, we have challenges because young people sometimes can hear things one way. I work with a lot of them. I mentor hundreds of students. And the more you focus them on tangible outcome, this is what is going to happen.
I'd like
they become very productive.
I hear you. We'd like to bring in at this point Professor Macharia Munene, historian, as well as political historian, to just Professor, good morning.
Good morning to you.
How are you doing?
So far, not bad.
Yes, we know you tried to. Indeed, we know you tried to make your way here earlier on, but that wasn't quite possible. But hey, we get connected either way, so we're very glad that you did, and that we look forward to when you could have you in the hot seat, actually. But obviously, you do know quite a lot in terms of history as per what this particular day actually means. We'd like you to then be able to put that up against the current stage where we are faced in terms of governance and leadership. What does it mean? The images that we see kind of mirror each other in 2025 as they did in the 90s. Are we looking towards a different political dispensation?
I think we are likely to have in fact, we have moved to a different level. One of the similarities is that in July 1990, the public lost fear of government, and the initiative moved away from the government and the political operators who are deciding everything and telling people what to do, to the other side where the initiative was coming from places other than the government. I think we are moving to that stage at this time, where up to this time the government has had the initiative, but now it looks as if the initiative is shifting now to the other side, whether they are called the Gen Zs or whatever they are. The government does not appear to be in control anymore, in part because it has lost credibility. And people are complaining that no one can be trusted. Policies appear to be made by people who do not know what they are doing. And therefore, there is very little trust in the government. And so the initiative was shifting to places other than the center, the government center. So there is that similarity. The loss of fear. Remember in 1990, the two players, main players, Charles Robia and Kenneth Matiba, had asked for a license to hold a rally at Kamukunji, and they were denied the license. And to make matters worse, they were detained on July the 4th, the American Independence Day. Actually, Robia was picked from the American ambassador's residence after he attended the ceremony there. So there were no leaders at that time. And yet, on the 7th, that Saturday, many people showed up at Kamukunji, with nobody guiding them as far as we could be told. And for 3 days, there was a running confrontation between the police and the public. And those 3 days were turning in terms of the relationship between the government and the people everywhere. So from there we can see the projection of gradually the government agreeing to multi-party arrangement, which it was very reluctant to do that. But Saba Saba was a turning point. Now, later on, there will be other people who put up something very dramatic, the creation of the forum. It was something very big, and usually people portray the Ford rallies as the Saba Saba. They were not. Saba Saba was something that had passed, but Ford came later. But when you have people like Shikuku and Orengo on top of pickups running around, that's something that came later. But it was as a result of what happened on July 7th, 1990.
Prof, I want to ask you something. I want to connect some things that you said, because one thing that you did say was that in 1990, folks showing up at Kamukunji on that Saturday morning, there was no leader. There was nobody who came forth and said, I am the person who is leading this, and these are folks who are rallying behind me. If we can draw parallels between what is happening today with the Gen Z movement, those are the words that are used to describe this movement as leaderless, as, tribeless. So it's more or less the same thing, but we have some of the same people who are saying you must have somebody who will come forth. We have the same thing playing out in 1990 that we do in 2025. Would that talk about a change in direction? Would that talk about a change in leadership or governance?
Well, I think what has happened since last year, initially the Gen Zs were truly leaderless, fearless, tribeless, and all those other things. But since then, we've seen the infiltration of these people to the point that some people have come out and claimed to be the leaders, which is a very different ballgame altogether. And claiming to be the leaders, then they are easily compromised. Some of them are easily compromised, others something else. So you start having divisions within the movement, which is not what it was in 1990. The 1990 movement was very strong. In part because it was kind of a feeling inside that things are not good and people have to react one way or the other. To the extent that there is same feeling at present about that things are not going well and people have to react, there is that similarity. And the one would look at it 1 year later, the government appears to be more determined on how to deal with it than could be said. Whether it's going anywhere or not is another matter, because there seems to be a very serious determination, particularly by the youth, to right the wrongs that are very clear. And that's where the strength is, that they appear to be determined, except for the opportunists. The goons that come in, these are opportunists, and mainly prompted by some political players in order to undermine the essence of the Gen Zs when it started. So we have a movement which can be interesting to watch as it unfolds. Now, my view is that these are people who do not know what trouble is, the war or fighting. They do not know anything about the Moi period. These were children who Kibaki said, well, they should go to school, and they went to school because they were told to go to school. And they learned a lot of interesting things. They learned how to ask questions. They learned how if things go wrong, you don't keep quiet. That's what they learned in schools. You just check what it is that they were reading. And now as they grow, become mature up, and they see things going wrong, then therefore they act what they learned. And that's to have become a problem, mainly to the elders and other people. Some of them might have wished they were the ones doing it, and they are regretting that they never could do that. In fact, people who are demonstrating before are puzzled by this movement, which they have no control over, and they would like to be the ones to claim leadership. So we have a different ballgame in this thing.
Professor Macharia, Dennis Okari here. You've talked about elders, and we've in the recent past have had this conversation around disillusionment. My question to you is, how do we process and move beyond the conversation around this movement being about a change of system versus individuals in power? Because how it's being turned around is it's targeted towards individuals. It's being ethnicized rather than looking at an entire agitation towards change of systems, change of structures, justice, and corruption.
Well, there is a similarity
Prof.
to 1990 because there was also an attempt to ethnicize the whole thing in 1990. And I remember Timothy Njeru visiting Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and then asking him why he was not speaking up on this matter. And then Jaramogi came up and said, he's for it. And that kind of diffused the whole thing, tried to say that it's a Kikuyu thing because Matiba and Rubia. And we have seen that even in this one, an attempt to sideline the issue by making it an ethnic issue. It may not be going very well for the people in charge. There were those who are trying to do that. There are also those who are trying to make a capital out of it. There are always opportunists everywhere. And they are trying to say now, if things would be very good if only this particular community did not exist, or was not engineering this and that and that, which is actually missing the point. Because what is happening, a lot of things are not going well in the country. And since they are not going well and people can see it, they need better tactics or better advisors on how to go about things. The force, the show of might can be a temporary solution, not a solution, just a little settlement. But the big thing is there, which needs a serious approach, which at present does not appear to be in the books for the people in the government. They need to rethink properly what is going on. And you have a contradiction. The Minister for Public Works has told that everybody must go to work at 8 o'clock. That's what he said. And then the police have blocked the way to work.
Indeed.
You cannot go. That's a contradiction. And then you say, what's this? In fact, I was trying to come to your studio there, and then I was told by a policeman. It was actually very nice about it. He just told me to turn around and go back. So that's what's going. The block, so people cannot go to. So essentially, there is a holiday, whether people like it or not, because people are not going.
I'd like to bring in
for safety, go ahead.
I want to bring in Prof. Midamba here because I'm hearing what Prof. Macharia is saying, and he says, you know what, they've asked us to go back. And I think that's a fundamental statement here, that it could be you literally in your vehicle going back, but by then not allowing this process to take place, is Kenya then actually literally going back? Where Prof. Macharia is in his vehicle going back home and not being able to see out a process that he had planned for this morning. And a policeman saying, go back because we're not going to be able. Are we then actually, and the many people who are being turned back from the city this morning or going where they need to go, are we going back? Are we retrogressing? Are we regressing right now?
Thank you. One is we need to understand what's going on. What's going on is not only a Kenya phenomenon. It's a worldwide phenomenon. Young people are different. My daughter is a very senior member of the U.S. State Department, but she does not like to be confined to an office 8 to 5. She wants to work from Bangkok, she wants to work from Kenya, from Europe, and this is very productive on what she does. And all her colleagues and friends, they're all like that. And therefore, they like to have a lot of freedom, these young people. They want to move where they want to move. They want to do what they want to do. And I see Macharia's experience and my experience this morning was entirely different. I got escorted by police who say, oh, you are providing a very important role for the country. And so they escorted me, to get here and get on time. The police don't mean to hurt people. The police have orders. That is not saying that they're not bad apples inside police. We're really not trained and untamed. They are there. But majority are people who want to follow order. They do what they're asked to do, whether stopping you from going to work or not. This is a policy behind the scene. Somebody has made a policy to not allow people to go in town because of the kind of carnage that happened recently, where innocent people got hurt. Stores got bombed, and all that kind of thing. In a democracy, you are expected to have order and respect to other people. You have the right to demonstrate, you have the right to say what you want to say, but you have no right to go and bomb somebody else's store and grab things by force.
Are they the same people who are doing these things? Are the people who are protesting the same individuals who are going out in these protests to destroy?
Well, I would not say that. I think majority of the people just mean to get out and express themselves.
So we can't give the same advice to the protesters to not go and destroy?
No, these people just are honest. They're expressing their frustration with the system. And, the best thing is to go out there and protest. But they're goons, unfortunately, that have been paid by other people to create mayhem. There are people who are going in there who are opportunists, who are looking at chaos. When anarchists come, everyone is for themselves. And this is such a beautiful country, people, that we have to protect it. We, the people, have to protect this country because it's much better than most of the countries that you see. But when people talk, it's like we are on the last death trap. There is nothing left.
But
yes.
Prof, when you say we have to protect our country, in your earlier statement, when you're giving the example of the U.S., you talked about us versus them. And you talked about tangible outcomes that will come out of this movement. But now, when you say we have to protect our country, then in this case, who is we and who is them? Because isn't then that what the political class have been trying to push around to make it is us versus them, meaning there are those who want to destroy the country and there are those who want to protect the country.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. In every society that happens. I don't think you can find any society where people are all thinking alike. That is not going to happen. There are people who are disgruntled. There are people who benefit, who are feeling much better. But what I'm saying is for us to have a sense of nationalism, with diverse opinion. Politicians have their own role. The citizens have their own role. Youth have their own role. But we can have that diverse opinion, but still respect what is it that we have. And what we have is Kenya. And Kenya is a country that we love.
I want last words from you, Professor Macharia, even as we close out this conversation, that we're looking into a day that could possibly mirror that Saturday that was on the 7th of July, 1990. But do you think that a protest in this manner, or the demonstrations that we see, will actually lead to the things that are being demanded for?
It's possible that they can lead to some of these things, but it will need a change of mind at the top. This idea of protecting the country is a good one, but there is a mistake in imagining that the protection of the country is monopoly of a few people. And when things are going wrong, maybe the problem is not the people demonstrating, it's the people who are doing the wrong things. Like the level of corruption in the whole country is exorbitant. The impression, whether right or wrong, that there is no sovereignty in the country, it's being mortgaged to some other external forces. So people are also protesting about that. When we hear that things are being done which do not make sense, especially when there is a shortage of. So protecting the country is a collective effort by all Kenyans, irrespective of who or the position. That day will come. When that will be, I do not know. But definitely things have changed. It's no longer the same thing. Yes, there will be effort by some interested players to mobilize goons, as they have been doing, to undermine the movement, the Gen Z movement. Because when you remember when they started last year, all they were doing is citing the Constitution and singing the national anthem and carrying the flag. That's what they were doing. And then somebody introduced the goons. And the effort was to undermine this thing. So the people who introduced the goons are the ones who need to change their position if they are going to help to protect the country. It cannot be said that you put a lot of police in their military gear or the security apparatus, guns and everything, which they do. And some of them, yes, are very polite. Actually, the one who turned me around was very polite about it, but still told me go back. We have good people, but we need a mental change, particularly at the top. That's where the change is needed, not with the masses. The masses need to be guided in the right way, and it can be done the right way if the right things are being done at the top. That's where the weakness is.
Professor Macharia Munene.
Then we shall do it.
And then we shall do it. Professor Macharia Munene, thank you so much for joining us on the line this morning. Professor Noah Midamba, and also thank you so much, Bwana Njeru Gathangu, for being here in this conversation with us this morning. An interesting day ahead, but thanks for sharing your insights with us on the Situation Room this morning. Everybody, thank you very much.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.